Listen to this. This is from the book God, the Evidence again. He says, ironically enough, scientific research in psychology over the past 25 years has demonstrated that far from being a neurosis, or source of neuroses, as Freud and his disciples claim, religious belief is one of the most consistent correlates of overall mental health and happiness. Study after study have shown a powerful relationship between religious belief and practice on the one hand, and healthy behaviors with regard to such problems as suicide, alcohol and drug abuse, divorce, depression, even perhaps surprisingly, levels of sexual satisfaction in marriage on the other. In short, the empirical data run exactly contrary to the supposedly scientific consensus of the psychotherapeutic profession. The peculiarity of this was highlighted by a guy named Dr. David Larson, who is a former National Institutes of Health psychiatrist. This is what he wrote. He said, if a new health treatment were discovered that helped to reduce the rate of teenage suicide, prevent drug and alcohol abuse, improve treatment of depression, reduce recovery time from surgery, lower divorce rates, and enhance a sense of well-being, one would think that every physician in the country would be scrambling to try it. You know what he's talking about? A belief in God. And what he's saying is this, that if people went by empirical evidence, when you went to see your doctor, no matter what your problem was, the doctor would say, oh, you have trouble with your kidneys. I need to ask you a question. Do you believe in God? Because if you started to believe in God, your kidneys might get better. If you started to believe in God, your depression might get better. Because in 80% of the people, it does. Isn't that weird? Don't you find that strange? And the point is this. If God does not exist, then to believe in God should have a negative impact on our life. Then why does it improve the life for 80% of the people in every area of their life as they increase their understanding and their belief in God? God has placed eternity in the hearts of men. That's what you'd expect if God really existed. All right, that's evidence from within. Now, God says there's evidence from without, from outside in creation. All right, now, I think best in analogies, so bear with me. This is a donut. But let's say, are you hungry? Somebody can have this donut at the end. Now let's say this donut represents the universe as we know it. Right? This is the entire universe. Now the question that we're asking tonight is there evidence of a baker? Right? Of somebody who actually made this donut. Now if I just started this talk and I said, hey, listen, I was going to talk about God and stuff, but really I just want to talk to you about this donut and I want to try to figure out, because I didn't see somebody make it, do you think somebody made it? You guys would all go, this guy's an idiot. Because of course somebody made it. But for the sake of argument, let's say this is the universe. And we're trying to decide whether there is a baker, whether God exists. Well, the first question to ask, has the donut always been there? I mean, if you said, well, the donut's been here as long as you can remember, as anybody, as your grandfather, your great-grandfather, your great-great-grandfather. If the donut always existed, then there would be no need for a baker. And for 130 years, that's what science told us. They said the universe is all there is, ever was, or ever will be. That's what Carl Sagan started his show, The Cosmos. The cosmos is all there is, ever was, ever will be. I was taught in school, maybe you are too, that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. That matter has always been, right? 130 years, science taught us that. 1927, Edwin Hubble, recognized that name from the Hubble telescope, was looking through a telescope and he discovered what he called the red shift. That meant that when he passed the light of a star through a prism, the light shifted to the red part of the color spectrum, which meant that the light source was moving away from him. And he began to formulate for the very first time what we now know as the Big Bang Theory. In 1964, two Bell Laboratory scientists named Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson launched what they called the COBE satellite. That was the Cosmic Explorer. And it was to do one thing. It was to measure the cosmic radiation background echo. Now, so you know what a cosmic radiation background echo is, if you were looking up at the fireworks on a 4th of July weekend and you saw a big burst go off and it lit up the sky and then it faded, but you could still see where that explosion took place in the blackness of the sky, that's a radiation echo. And they sent this cosmic explorer up to measure the explosion that took place at the beginning of the universe. And what they have found since then, since 1964, through dozens of experiments, the greatest of which was probably an experiment done by two scientists called Taylor and Hulse on binary stars, that proved Einstein's theory was correct. And the whole thing is this, that scientists now know that the universe hasn't always been here. In fact, scientists will tell you that there was a point when there were no ingredients for the universe. There was no matter. There was no energy. There was no time. There was no dimension. There wasn't even any space for that molecule to not exist in. There was nothing. Absolutely nothing. And that's a huge problem for people who believe that there was no baker. Because the question, of course, is where did everything come from? Because in our world, something doesn't come from nothing. Because there's nothing for that something to come from. Right? So the question is, where did it all come from? Genesis 1:1 says this, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. For centuries, theologians had a phrase for that. It was a Latin phrase. Ex nihilo. Out of nothing, God made something. Now science agrees that the universe came out of nothing. Something came. By the way, little point of interest. The Bible is the only religious book in the world that claims that God exists and created outside of time and space. And now scientists would say that's the only way it could be. So if anybody ever asked you, why do you believe in God? You could almost say, between 1927 and the year 1995, science pretty much proved it. There's an astrophysicist named Hugh Ross, and I heard him giving a lecture, and he said that he did not know any astrophysicists who were atheists, who are hardcore atheists anymore, because they know better now. They know better. Isn't that amazing? That's kind of the dagger in the heart of atheism. But I got one more. The second part of evidence outside of us, if you're looking at creation, if you're going to try to determine whether there's a baker or not, what you might want to look for is evidence of a recipe. Because if you took this donut apart, you'd find out that there are several ingredients in this donut. But the ingredients all had to be added at a particular ratio. I mean, if you put a cup of salt instead of a cup of sugar, the donut would be changed and it would no longer be edible. One little change in ingredient. And when something is so precisely measured out in ratio, then it gives evidence for a recipe, and a recipe gives evidence to the mind of a baker, you see. When I was about 10, my parents decided to leave me home for the first time without a babysitter. I don't know when the first time you were left home without a babysitter was. But whenever we were left home, and a babysitter came, we'd get them to make popcorn. And back when I was a kid, we didn't have microwave popcorn. We made it, in a big pan with oil and stuff. And so I thought, hey, I'm my own babysitter. I'll make popcorn. So I got a pan out and I put it on the stove, and I opened up the cabinet where the oil was, but there were several bottles. And I wasn't counting on that. And I was going, oh man, which bottle? I've seen my mom do this a bunch of times. So I picked the bottle out, and I thought it would be the right kind of oil, and it was Karo syrup. If you know what Karo syrup is, it's a sugar base, So I put it in, and then I put a couple of kernels in and heated it up, and I put the lid on everything. I waited for those kernels to pop, and it never popped. And I opened it up, and the Karo syrup was like forming these huge bubbles. It's like a volcano going off. It'd go